They're there, and we need to address them. Equal access to education. Specific target groups. The cost of face-to-face education. I've talked to a few people about that, but I was in Denver a few months ago, and a colleague there told me about something that was on the table, namely to reduce the number of teaching hours per week, because the school districts could no longer face the rising cost of face-to-face education. So the whole problem was that if we need to reach more people, and that's my first line, equal access, the better we become at providing access to education, that means the more formal education, the more education we need to provide. And that means a rising cost of education. How are we going to deal with that? Demographic shifts, what I mentioned before, people live longer. There's a need not only for more education before people enter the labor force, but also throughout their professional careers, they need more teaching. Profiles and training of teachers. How are we going to deal with that? Do we find enough good teachers? How are we going to address the problem of teachers in primary schools? In a lot of countries, people who teach in primary schools get, first of all, paid less than teachers at higher levels. They get typically less training, less background than teachers, for example, at the level of secondary education. While on the other hand, they have to deal with the most diverse part of the schooling system, of the educational system. It's when children are at the level of primary education that they're all together, where the diversity in the group is largest. So that's something we need to talk about. And then we definitely need to talk about access to further education. How does that work? How employers come to us and say, well, you know, we're not so happy. There's too much, there's too much money going to education. Because, look, when we get them, they're not trained, they're not ready to start. And then you go talk to the universities and say, okay, well, we could perhaps do a better job. But you know, the way we get them in first year students, no. Really, talk to the people at the level of secondary education. Please. Make sure we get better students. And we'll get better output when you give us better input. And you go to the secondary education people and they, you know, primary education, yes, but you know, we can understand it because the teachers at the level of primary education, etc. That's my story of a few minutes ago. And you go talk to the primary education people and say, well, yes, but we are trying. We are really trying. We're tired. It's so challenging. But you know, parents are really not with us. They really think that we should solve all the problems, and wouldn't it be nice if at least they would take some responsibility for solving the problems? That's the overall picture. And that's, I think, that sort of points at the need for an integrated approach to education. I mean, you cannot just single out one layer or one aspect and then think you will solve all the problems of education. And then there's my bottom line. Students actually increasingly tell us that they really don't like what we're doing. They're not so happy with the way education is going. It's not so engaging, and while we have more education than ever before, we also have more dropouts than ever before. This is a first attempt to understand what is going on. This is sort of a timeline. It takes you back 30,000 years, and you say, okay, we lived to be 30. And let's move on through history, and okay, the Middle Ages, medieval period, 48, nice. Then it started to decline a little bit. Okay, you go back to 38 and to 40, and then all of a sudden, what do you see? Around 1850, in a period of about 100 years, you see that all of a sudden, life expectancy doubles, more than doubles. So that's sort of a period where a lot of things happened. Now, that's one observation. And actually, part of that jump over a 100, 150, 200 year period has to do with formal education. But if we go back the other way, like, okay, 30,000 years, and let's move back, okay, out of the backlot, we go all the way, we're at the Suriname River, we go back, let's say, anywhere between 200 and 500,000 years ago. That's where things really started to change on a biological level. That's when our brains started to shape, where we really became a verbal species, able to express ourselves. Our hemispheres started to become asymmetrical and things like that. That's when really, under evolutionary pressure, things started to change. And now what's really important to understand when we look at the problems that we are facing in formal education is that the brains that we use to do all that novel stuff, the brains that allow me to take this thing and just push a button and move to the next slide, and my phone and my laptop and my tablet and all that stuff, and the fiber network that we were explained about by the previous speaker, all of that are things we do with brains that are anywhere between 200,000 and 500,000 years old. There was no evolutionary pressure for reading and writing. And that means that we do all that reading and writing with a brain that was not designed for reading and writing. That also means that there is not sort of not in the same way as when you have a genetic structure for it, there is no formula that says read and write, and this is how you do it. And actually, when you look at reading and writing processes, you see that that throughout the human species, there are, and even within small communities, there are different ways of processing reading and writing. Okay, what kind of education is sort of the natural setting for our brain? Well, first of all, it's community-based. Learning happens in a community. It's needs-based. You learn the things that you need because they sort of facilitate your life, your everyday life. So there's a direct connection between the things you learn and the things you need and the things that help you. It's open. The problem of equal access to education simply doesn't exist 100,000 years ago. It's open to everyone. It will be different for most people and for most people that are part of that process, but it's open to everyone. Compare that to our schools now, who have closed, who are within four walls and with gates that close, and sometimes with access control, and you don't get in if you cannot prove that you belong to that school, and things like that. There is, though, a cultural canon, a narrative, chants, things that sort of carries, that sort of connects the community together, a sort of shared knowledge, deeply shared knowledge. It may be wrong from a scientific point, but it's something that does connect a community. It's essentially intergenerational. It's intergenerational. And yes, people from similar ages learn from looking at what others do and mistakes others make, of course, but it's intergenerational. It's really sort of part of the community where all levels, all ages are involved in the learning process. There's a lot of trial and error. That's what we're good at. We learn from mistakes. And there's a lot of mimicry going on, and actually we are, to a large extent, hardwired to copy what we see, to look at what people do and copy it, empathize with them, understand what they are saying. That's a really important basis for learning. Without that, it would be very hard for us to learn from each other. And then came along formal education, and formal education really did great things. It came with science. It came with the potential to sort of focus in on specific aspects and really go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Not just wider, but deeper and deeper and deeper, and come to a good grasp of essential information. And it came with industry. It came with sort of the need for industrialized processes. I mean, the industrialized processes only are possible when you have a labor force that has sort of a sort of general basic knowledge that where you don't have to retrain people every time, and where you don't have to start from an individual learning biography and then adapt it to specific need and potential. Industry doesn't work like that. At least it didn't work like that at the time when it sort of came about. So I see formal education as sort of a pocket knife, a Swiss pocket knife, with all kinds of specialized blades. You can use one to clip your fingernails, and you can use one to sort of polish them a little bit, and you can open one to open a beer can, and you have one that you can use to tighten screws, and you see it's all these different things, and that gives us a potential for specialization.